Joanna, and you're all very welcome to this, our sixth in the series of Fireside Fridays, and you're all very welcome. And just a bit of Zoom housekeeping as usual. We will speak uninterrupted, or I should say Emer and Siobhan will speak uninterrupted for 20 minutes, and then we'll stop the recording. And feel free to put your questions into the chat, and we'll go on for another 10 minutes, and they will not be recorded. But just today, we're speaking about how essential arts, humanities and social science PhDs are in the workplace. They're absolutely essential. I really believe that. And we've two great speakers today. We've Siobhan Nic Flannachadha from Student Survey, who's a PhD alumni from UCD, from the School of Psychology, but she'll introduce herself a little bit as well. And asking her the questions is my colleague Emer Cunningham from Graduate Studies, who will ask, and you've met Emer on a previous Fireside Friday when she spoke about the RPDP, but today she and Siobhan are going to have a chat for 20 minutes. So I'm going to hand over to the two of you, and thank you very much, Emer and Siobhan, and we'll see you again in a few minutes.
So, hello everybody, and you're all very, very welcome, and I'm sure you'll really enjoy the chat with Siobhan. I have the privilege of working with Siobhan on the Student Survey. I hope you all participated in back there in March for the UCD contribution. But enough of that, I'm just going to hand you directly over to Siobhan and ask Siobhan if you wouldn't mind just tell us a little bit about your PhD trajectory, and then your transition into the workplace, and perhaps you know, what the motivations as when you were moving through the PhD, and then when you were moving into the workplace. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Emer. And as Emer has mentioned, Emer and I know each other quite well, so that's why I'm going to trust Emer. If at any point she needs to hoosh me along or get me back on topic, please do, Emer. And that is the nature of the relationship that we have. So, yeah, I suppose, as I said, I'm loving seeing the names pop up in the attendees list. And if you haven't already, stick a message in the chat and let us know what school or department you're in. Just because I like to know who it is that I'm talking to, and especially if you're a former student of mine, say hello as well. So I completed my PhD in UCD in 2015, and then did my Viva and handed in final product in 2016. My PhD was in the School of Psychology, and the majority of it was a project on psycholinguistics. So I was examining the middle stages of childhood for language development of some of the more complex aspects of Irish for Irish and English bilingual children. But one thing that kind of I was reminded of when I was just contemplating what we might talk about as part of this discussion, I was reminded that my favorite chapter of my PhD was the chapter that was more of a sociolinguistics focus, which started out of wanting to help my supervisor with another project that she was doing with another student and needed somebody to step in to do some interviews. And that ended up developing into a chapter of my own PhD, and indeed my favorite one, and then led to an awful lot of conference presentations. It was the first paper from my PhD and got me into a really excellent network of researchers that I'm still part of, even though I don't really do very much in the sociolinguistics or psycholinguistic space anymore. So that was just one of the things that I was reminded of, that you just don't know where paths are going to lead you to, and just to be open-minded about those, I suppose, is one thing that I think has always struck me in a lot of the things that I've done through the PhD and alongside the PhD. So since completing my PhD, as I said, in 2016, I went on to work with the Disability Access Route to Education, which some of you may be familiar with. DARE is the acronym, which is also associated with the Higher Education Access Route. So I went to work with the Shared Services Unit in the Irish Universities Association, as it was known at the time. And again, one thing that I was reminded of was that when I first joined the team, I was brought on as what was intended to be a 6-month kind of consultation, because they were introducing a new method of assessing educational impact. And I was brought on just to oversee and to be involved with the rollout of that piece. And that ended up developing into a very excellent 2.5-year relationship with that unit, and indeed with the staff in that unit. So again, so what seemed like a short kind of project that I was going to be brought in on just to do a defined piece of work ended up developing into something much more significant. because of what I was bringing to that role. So the role that I took up was research and policy officer, and that didn't exist before I came in. And that's a key point I think that I want to make throughout this discussion, is that for so many of you, you have such a unique skill set and such a unique combination of skills that there may well be jobs that don't exist until you come along. It is by virtue of your unique skill set and the combination of those skills that companies, if they have any sense, will want to take those skills and put them to best use. So it's kind of, you have to be a bit, I suppose, open-minded a little bit about the career trajectory, because having a PhD gives you such an excellent combination of skills, but it's a little bit unpredictable sometimes as to where those will bring you, in my experience.
What I'm hearing, Siobhan, there in your within the PhD and then afterwards is it sounds like what you get excited about is dealing with people, perhaps building networks. I mean, both this role that you have at the moment and that role there, they're both national, aren't they? I mean, you must have had to take both your personality, but the skill sets that you might have accrued within your PhD to make those networks and to establish yourself and to get work done. If you just explore that, I mean, that the particular pieces that you would say that have helped you, the skill sets that you would have accrued, and how they might have applied then into your career trajectory at the moment.
Sure. I'll actually just pick up on that point about networking first, Emer, if I may. I attended an event when I was in probably the final year of my PhD, which I will say is a difficult time to be thinking about, because you have so much on your plate when you're writing up, that it actually, funnily enough, isn't, I found, the best time to be thinking about career things, because you need to be so focused. But it was at an event on the importance of networking, and it was kind of networking with a capital N. And it made it seem like you were kind of going out collecting Pokemon, of you had to make sure when you go to conferences that you have your checklist of people that you're going to make sure that you introduce yourself to. And I found that to be such an unhelpful conceptualization of what a network is, that it very much made me realize that it's networking with a lowercase n is what you want. And for two reasons. One of those is during your PhD. For me personally, and I'm only going to speak from personal experience, the thing that got me through was my circle of friends, and you know, and I've retained those friends. I mean, I helped throw a baby shower for one of them, who's since had her baby in the last couple of weeks. You know, these are people that help you through the process of doing the PhD, because they know what you're going through. So your partner might not necessarily know, your parents might really not have a clue what you're doing with your day to day. Some people think that you just continue going to lectures. So it's very important to have that network of peers around you. And I really empathize, and I'm really impacted by the thought of some of you not having access to campus at the moment and not having access to those physical networks. So please, if I can emphasize any point from my own experience, make sure that you find ways of maintaining that network and that circle of friends around you. But then once you finish the PhD, once you go beyond that, that network ends up becoming could end up being quite influential for you. I know certainly in my experience, when a lot of the roles that I've had have been because particularly women have looked out for me and have let me know when opportunities were coming up, have encouraged me to go forward for opportunities, or have indeed, you know, directed some work my way. And I've been able to do the same thing for some others as well, of when I know that there's a particular role that needs filling, or when there's something, you know, when we need somebody with a particular skill set, I know who I'm thinking of, and not in any sort of kind of nepotism way or jobs for your mates or anything like that, but it is that thing of they are the people who are going to know what is going on in other sectors as you spread out across lots of organizations or continue doing your research. That's the network that's going to become your professional network, much more, I think, than having gotten a hold of some, you know, senior academic at a conference and having made sure that they have your card or that they agree to link up with you on LinkedIn. Those ones are important as well, but I think that it's that network that you cultivate at this point that could have very significant impacts for your career. And as
you say, you know, sometimes the jobs don't exist in the first instance. You develop and then you grow into them. But equally, as you say, if you're thinking about people with a particular skill set, there's jobs that that don't exist yet, and you can think about that they that they are evolving over time. And we had a speaker from a couple of weeks ago, and she was in LinkedIn and had a similar story to yourself, in that she had started in one role, but then when they appreciated the skill set that she had, then she was they developed a role for her. And so beyond the networking, then what other skill sets would you say that you've brought into the workplace from the PhD experience?
Again, I'll speak from my own experience, but I think what I experienced goes across the breadth of everybody who is in attendance here, because I think there are some key skills that you develop doing a PhD that all of you are developing right now, whether you know it or not, and regardless of the topic or the nature of your research. All of you are problem solvers. You can't do a PhD without becoming a problem solver. And well, actually, let me take a step back. One of the things that I think sometimes can happen when you're doing a PhD is that you don't realize that what you're doing is understood in businesses in a certain way. So what you are doing is just doing your PhD. Businesses and organizations outside of academia will call that problem solving. And I remember when I applied, so when I finished writing up my PhD, I applied for a job and did an interview probably about a week after handing in or something, which, by the way, was a very silly idea because your brain is fried. But I went into the interview fairly confident that I was going to get it, because I thought, I've done a PhD, I have all of this, experience, and I'm bringing all of this to the role, and it was a short enough term role, and I thought, I have got this, not a problem. And I went into the interview expecting them to know what skills I had because I'd done a PhD. They didn't have a clue. I think people do think that doing a PhD is going to college for another years and that you're going to lectures. So I had prepared my ideas for the role. I had prepared all of my spiels about different things, but it hadn't actually occurred to me to prepare responses for, well, what does it having a PhD bring to this job? Because I had assumed that they would just know that. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions they asked me was, okay, well, you have your PhD. What experience do you bring from your PhD into this role? And I swear to God, Emer, no word of a lie, rabbit in headlights, I went, I'm really good at Microsoft Office. No, not the right answer.
Not the right
answer.
Yeah.
But what you do have is problem solving. What you do have is time and money management, even if it's just your own money. You don't have very much of it, I'd imagine, if you're anything like me. So you have that experience. You have and time over 3 or 4 years as well. We're not just talking managing your day, your individual day to day. You have independence, no matter how involved your supervisor is. You have independence and you're cultivating that ability, which is something like now more than ever. Look at how many of us are working from home, and the idea that you need constant supervision is just not, it's non-existent. You're going to be able to go into any company, any organization, or if you continue on in academia and have that independence, because you can't do a PhD without it, again, no matter how supportive your supervisor is. And ultimately, you're all project managers. I mean, that's my job at the moment. I manage a national project, and there's plenty. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's aspects of it that I never thought I'd know as much about data protection. I never thought I'd know as much about advertising and communications, having done a PhD in psycholinguistics. You pick that stuff up as you go along, in the same way that you've been picking up your research methods, in the same way that you've been picking up your presentation methods, in the same way that you've been dealing with any of the issues that come up through your PhD. So they're key skills that you have. And in addition to those, the IUA, the Irish University Association, has a really good document called the Skills Statement, I think is what it's called. And that's a good one as well, because it takes what you're doing and translates it into words, that so when you go in for your interviews, that you're using words that are commonly understood between the academic experience and whether you're going to go and work in a charity or whether you're going to go and work in, in a consultancy. One other thing to bear in mind as well, though, that personally, just speaking from my own experience, I think you need to be open-minded when it comes to your career trajectory as a PhD graduate. It is a superb set of skills to have. Something like 2% of people in the world have a PhD. You might think everyone you know has a PhD because you're surrounded by them, but you have got a special qualification here, and don't forget that. But at the same time,
can I just echo what you're saying, just to sorry to cut across, but with just some experience I had myself with somebody that came in on a short-term contract into UCD, into our own office, and she, a historian, and the job required 3 years experience, and she crafted exactly as you're describing there. We actually had to interview her because the CV, the way she wrote the application, was that she explained that she was a project manager, that she had time management skills, exactly all that. It's interesting you say all of those things. And so then, and she said she'd done her PhD in 3 years. So she said, I have 3 years experience in all of this and administration, etc. And so we had to give her the interview, and then we gave her the job. Absolutely excellent. And I think what I'm hearing as well from you is I think with PhDs is not intimidated by large subject areas. So you're talking about the breadth of things that you've had to engage with that you didn't at the outset perhaps realize you're going to have to do. But as a PhD student as well, or being successful in it, is that these large projects aren't as intimidating as they might be, because you can say, right, well, there's the project, breaking it down into its component parts and then managing it in an ordered fashion. So yeah, no, that's really key to hear that about all of those skill sets that you're saying that are inherent to, and it's not just for we're talking about arts, humanities and social sciences here, but it's that would be across the board for all PhDs in all disciplines. I think you'd agree.
I might just add one point to that is in just that, I suppose one of the things that you have to acquire in doing a PhD is depth of knowledge. You were developing as experts in your field. But as well, one thing that I found worked for my style of working, and it's been working for me going forward, is having a breadth of experience and breadth of knowledge. And I suppose that might sound different to different people, because you might want to get as much depth as you possibly can in your field, because that's how you see that suiting the trajectory that you want to be on at the moment. And if you're determined to be in academia, like, good luck to you. Just be aware that there are lots of other opportunities out there, especially for graduates, in the what an interesting field of graduates that you guys are going to become. But as well, like, I found that having a breadth of experience across, I'll be honest, I was one of those people in college who did every Nixer going. I graded papers, I lectured, I did lab, I was senior lab demonstrator, I did tutorials, I did exam invigilation, I taught Zumba. I still do. Every Nixer going.
I did not know that.
I was the one who everyone was like, Siobhan, how many jobs have you, like, how are you doing this other you're organizing a conference? That was just
throw yourself into it.
That's how I work. And that might not appeal to everybody. You might have no interest whatsoever in organizing a conference. But bear it in mind, make sure that you're publishing, make sure that you're just getting experience in a couple of different areas, even if your main concern is depth of knowledge. Bear in mind breadth, try out a couple of different roles. If for nothing else, to have a couple of extra things to throw in your CV. Let's face it, I didn't enjoy exam invigilation one bit. Not entirely sure that it added all that much to my CV, but it gave me money. So hey, look at these are the things.
And you get a feel for things, don't you? You try it out and you decide, I really don't want to go down that particular road.
Completely. Well, Emer,
knowing that I do,
I'll be honest with you. The reason that I decided not to stay in academia was I don't really enjoy writing. It doesn't fill me with joy. And if you don't enjoy writing, you're just not going to, for me anyway, you're not, like, teaching is, if I love teaching, don't get me wrong, I adore teaching, but it doesn't make up the whole of a job of an academic.
Oh yeah, so much more to it.
In higher education, and
can I just, sorry, because I'm conscious of the time, and we'll obviously be chatting here for a long, long time. But just to bring it back, I suppose, to the career thing, because you mentioned the fact that you were engaging with your kind of going for jobs and stuff at the, kind of very much towards the end, when you had an awful lot of other stuff on your plate, along with the pressure of completing. So I was just wondering if you had to go back, when you might have engaged in that career, thinking about your career and putting your jobs together. I mean, you were doing it already, I mean, by the sounds of things, because you were already, as you say, exploring, and in that exploration, you were obviously making decisions, internal decisions, well, maybe, you know, how you're going to move. But when would you advise, you know, the students that we have with us today to engage with their career development and well, engage with Ger here, with the Careers Network?
Right now? Wherever you are, keep it in mind. I'm all for being present, and at the moment you guys are present in doing your research, and by God have you enough to be doing. I just don't know. When I think about it, like, I spent 4 months collecting data across 13 schools in the depths of the Connemara Gaeltacht. I couldn't have collected my data any other way than being in school. So if you are one of those people who have been reading lots of comments by the responses to studentsurvey.ie, whose data collection has been interrupted and whose access to facilities, my heart really does go out to you. But yeah, I would think that it's something you kind of have to keep in the back of your mind all of the time, even if it's keeping a diary for yourself of kind of going, God, I hated that experience. I don't want to ever be in a job where I have to be dealing with politicians ever again, or something like that. Even if you just kind of keep notes for yourself of, you know, and it's just as well keeping track of what you are doing. That's a big thing, because when you go to write your CV, you don't want to sit there scratching your head going, what have I done for the last 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. Even just keeping notes of all of the continuing professional development courses you do every time. Make sure you keep track of that, any publications, presentations, everything like that. It's just, even if it's not in a CV form, just keep it in a Word doc somewhere.
And you're echoing, I mean, the talk that I gave a couple of weeks ago, we have in UCD now the Research and Professional Development Plan, and that's exactly that, the minutes of the Research Studies Panel's meetings, and also then that kind of CV build that you're talking about, just annotating absolutely everything. And as you say, even better to talk about your feelings about particular aspects. Well, I like that, I don't like that. And we're making the point that 3 or 4 years go by and you might remember what you did in year one, and just there it is, it's already built in. I just think that I'm going to have to close this down now, because we will move, not close it down, but move over to some Q&A. And the format is that we record this section and then we'll move to Q&A. So we'll not record.
Emer, can I jump in with just one parting comment?
Please, yes.
That's the case. One of the key strengths that PhD graduates have, and regardless of whether you call it a strength or a skill or whatever you want, is your resilience. You have to be resilient to finish a PhD. Maybe not all of you will finish it. Maybe you will change your minds and say, I've had enough of this, or I have other things to do. Like, speaking from very personal experience, I spent the last 6 months of my PhD probably crying every 3 or 4 days.
Oh gosh.
Like and you know, it had an impact on my relationships. It is a very tough thing to do, and I can see nodding heads on screen. Of course, yeah. But for you to be able to keep getting up, especially during all of this COVID nonsense, and to keep at it, speaks to your resilience. You will go into any company, any organization, any other job, and be strong for that. And if you decide that you don't want this anymore, that's okay as well. Don't beat yourself up. Leave if it's not what you want to do anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you do get to the end of it and you finish it, you are going to be strong for that experience, and you're going to be resilient, and you will bring that resilience with you into any job that you do after you finish your PhD. So just of all of the skills that you have, that is the one that the country needs. That's the one the world needs. We need all of these creative, resilient thinkers who are able to stand on their own 2 feet and take, you know, a punching sometimes, and still be able to keep their head up and keep their own minds sane. So resilience is something that you have in spades. And if you're starting out, you will develop that as you go on. So
brilliant. Lovely. I think that's the perfect way to close off on this section of it, and we'll turn off the recording now, and we move over to Q&A from any of the students. We see if there's any questions coming through from there.